Hey, I'm Jason Laughlin and welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get a bunch of great classic country steel bends out of the movable G shape. And I think you'll be amazed at how many different ideas you could get out of this shape if you just go searching for them. Whether you're new to country bends or you've been doing this stuff for a while, I think there's something in this lesson for everybody. Stick around. Okay, before we get started, you're going to want to grab the free notation tab and backing track for this lesson so you could follow along. And that's going to also include the notation and tab for the solo that you just heard. If you get to the end of this video and you're enjoying it and you want to show some love for this channel, I really do appreciate it. And the best way to do that is to hit the subscribe button, little thing on your end, but it really does help me keep growing this channel and sharing free lessons and material. Okay, before we get started, let's make sure we're on the same page with movable G shape. I'm talking about the G shape from the CAGED system, which comes from the open G chord. When we do this movable, say if I move this up a whole step, I have to use my index finger kind of like a capo and acts as the nut to cover all those open strings. So that's the movable shape. Not very comfortable. We don't often look at it like this. This is just kind of a visual aid. Usually I break this up into smaller string sets. So for this lesson and for the solo that I just showed you, I'm really only looking at the top 4 strings and a couple different voicings of an A major chord using this G shape. So one is going to be a second inversion A major chord. So this is coming out of that G shape. So I have 5, root, 3, root. The other one is a 5th chord, so no third, 5, root, 5, root. Now when I'm playing this in the solo, I'm doing all this stuff up an octave. So I wanted to show it to you here first, just because I think it's visually a little more friendly. But now let's pop this up an octave, 14th fret and pinky on the 17th. So there's my second inversion A, and then here's that 5th chord. So now I have the chords, I have the arpeggios, 5, root, 3, 5, root. Now I need a scale to kind of weave through these things. And really there's going to be 3 that I'm using here. One is going to be a major scale. So if I start on the 5, I could walk through an A major scale. 5, 6, 7, root, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, root. Or I could do a Mixolydian scale and lower all the 7, so I have a flat 7, 5, 6, flat 7, root, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, root. Or I could use an A major pentatonic scale, which is just going to be very similar to the major scale. I'm just dropping out the 4s and the 7s here. So 5, 6, root, 2, 3, 5, 6, root. So those are my highways. Those scales are helping me get around in that shape. The chord tones or the arpeggio notes are my rest stops. Those are points of resolve. Everything that's not a chord tone is a tension that needs to be resolved. On to bends. Probably the most common bend that people do out of the G shape is bend the 2 up to the 3. So we're looking at this bend. Here's our 2. Up to the 3. It's a whole step bend going from B to C sharp. When we have that bend happening, what we're going to do is we're going to play around with notes from the A Mixolydian scale on top. But you could use the pentatonic, you could use the major scale. I'm just choosing the Mixolydian scale as an example here. So after each one of my bends from 2 to 3, I'm going to play a note from the A Mixolydian scale. And I'm going to come all the way down to the 3, and I can't really come down further than that, because on the next string, the G string, is my bend. So 2 to 3 bend, root, 2 to 3 bend, flat 7, 2 to 3 bend, 6, 5, 4, 3. So I could also do these bends and let them ring into each other. So root on top, flat 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Now another thing I could do is I could bend that 2 to 3 and hold it in place while I play these melody notes. It tends to die off pretty quick. So commonly what you do is after each melody note you play, you go back and you pick the string that has the held bend on it. So something like this. Up to the root and then come back to play that held bent note, then my flat 7, then the held bend, then the 6, held bend, 5, held bend, 4, and 3, and resolve. And then I'm just resolving that 3, bending down to 2, and down to the root. Sometimes I'll do that with the middle finger on the melody notes and pick, always playing the G string. That's pretty common if you want to get a little bit more of a chicken picking sound. Something to play around with. Now there's another common bend that we do out of the G shape, and that's bending the 5 up a whole step to the 6. If you remember, we have 2 5s in that shape. We have 1 on the D string, and we have 1 on the B string. We're gonna bend the 1 on the B string. So we're gonna bend that up a whole step, E to F sharp, or 5 to 6 in the key. And when we do that, we have only 1 string above that B string, so we don't have as many scale choices to add to that bend. But what we usually do is we'll add either a root, a flat 7, or a 6, giving us a unison bend. And when we're bending 5 to 6, you got to remember we're bending up to a note that's not a chord tone. So when you do that, that bend has to resolve somewhere. You can't just leave it up there. You could either resolve it down to the 5 again. That would be nice because that would line up with the chord. Or you could bend it down and come back and resolve down there on the C sharp, which is a third of the chord. Either one of those is going to sound really good. Now another common approach is to grab both strings at the same time, and this is going to give you a really immediate attack. We're going to do this with pick and middle finger. So let me set this up. I'm going to put my pinky here on the root. I'm going to set up my fingers here on the 2, grab both of them at the same time, kind of pinching at the strings, and bend into pitch. I could do this with the 7 on top, the 6, the 5, the 4, or the unison, the 2 or 3, sorry. Now that we have these basics together, let's mix everything up and learn a couple licks so you can see all these ideas on their feet. And just to recap, we've learned the arpeggio notes for this shape. We've learned 3 different scales weaving their way through this shape so we could see how to get around. And we've learned like 4 or 5 approaches now to using these bends out of this particular shape. All right, so let's take a look at example 1 here. Okay, let me break that down for you. So I'm starting by grabbing both notes at the same time, and I have the 5th on top, and I'm going to do this twice. Then when I have that held up there, I'm going to grab the 6, back to the held bent note, to the 5, back to the held bent note, release it, and coming down to the root. Then I'm going to bend 2 to 3 again. This time I'm going to jump up to the root, hold that bend, 6, 5, and release. So together. And I'm using a lot of pick and middle finger here and popping the strings just a little bit to give me a little bit of a chicken picking sound. All right, let's add something to this that steel players do all the time, which is a pickup. So a lot of times steel players will play a melody that pulls you into the downbeat of the chord, and there's a couple common ones that they do. And sometimes you just need to learn a few of them and they can become templates for you to make up your own. So let me show you one that starts on the upbeat of 1 before the downbeat of the track. And so I'm going to start here on the flat 5 on the upbeat of 1. So 1 and on the flat 5, sliding into the 5, 6, major 7, sliding into the root, 2, root. So in time that's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So 7/8 notes out of that measure before the track starts. 1. And then from there we're going to continue with the lick just as we played it. Let's try that with the track. All right, there's one more thing that I wanted to add, and that's a chicken picking approach to these that I got into a little bit before, but I want to show you how somebody like James Burton would chicken pick his way through this G shape. And I'm going to show you 2 approaches. These are very common things that I do all the time, other country players do all the time. So let's start off by bending the 5 into the 6. While that's held, I'm going to come across to that first string, and I'm going to mute behind my pick here, and I'm going to get a muted 6 note of the scale, I mean. And then I'm going to use my middle finger to get another muted stroke. So pick, middle. So I put that together with the bend. And when you come across to do those muted strokes, you end up muting and choking that bend, which is a good thing. That's what you want. And we could do that down here with the 2 and the 3, fretting the 3. We could resolve those. Resolving down to the 3. Here I'm resolving down to the root. And it doesn't have to be a unison bend, it could be the root on top. Or it could be a 5 on the top. So that's one chicken picking technique that James would use with these bends. Let me show you the other. Let's start with the same kind of bend, bending 5 up to 6. When we get that up there, I'm going to start with my middle finger, and this is going to be muted with my palm here, on the first string, coming across for a muted stroke with the pick on the second string, and another muted stroke here on the first string. And that's going to be a triplet on the upbeat. So this is on the downbeat, and then we have this triplet on the upbeat. From there, we could resolve down to a chord tone. We could do that with the 2 and the 3, fretting the 3. And we could change notes in there. So halfway through that, I switched. First time I hit that first string, it's the root on the top, come across with a pick, then switch to the 6 on top, then release the bend and resolve. I could do that with the 5 and go to the 4, or the 5 down to the 3. 2 classic James Burton approaches. Now the best thing is about everything I just showed you is it's all movable. So everything we did out of that G shape A chord up here at the 14th fret, say we were playing over progression like I was doing at the top of this video in the key of A with a 1-4-5 progression. If I need to move this to my 4 chord, the D chord, I could take this G shape and move this down to a D. And everything stays the same, the template's the same. I'm still looking at the same shapes, still looking at the same pentatonic scale, same Mixolydian scales. All the licks and approaches I showed you, all of those transfer over to that new chord because it's the same shape. Playing over the 5 chord, Okay, G-shaped D chord, move it up a whole step. I get a G-shape E chord. So when I'm playing over that track at the top there, all I'm doing is using the same shape for every chord, but I'm mixing up all these approaches, and that's what's keeping it all interesting. Hopefully you were following along with the free notation and tab at the link down below. If you weren't, go grab those. And if you want to hear all these ideas being mixed up and used in a more musical context rather than a lesson context like this, remember you have the tab and notation for the performance at the top of the video. So grab that too, follow along, learn that solo. You have the backing track for it also. If you want to check out any of my other educational materials, go check out my website. I'll put that down below. I have courses, master classes, jam tracks, all that good stuff. And again, the best way to support this channel is to hit that subscribe button. Helps me out a bunch, keeps this channel growing, and helps me keep sharing free lessons and materials. Hope you dug this one. I'll see you in another video.